What's up guys, welcome back to A&J. I've got an exciting new order that I'm going to make. It's a cooler. I've made this cooler in the past. I made it a couple months ago. I saw it somewhere on I think another YouTube channel and I just fell in love with it and I had to have one. So I made one with two coolers. It's perfect for having events. Normally you have one cooler for the alcoholic beverages and you have another cooler for soft drinks. So with this double stacker, I mean, you have it all in one centerpiece, right? And it's a great piece to have. Your guests are gonna love it. They're gonna ask where you got it, and you know, if you make it, I mean, that's something to be proud of. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys the materials that you need, the tools that you may need, some alternatives. If you don't have all the tools required, it's definitely doable with just using either a miter saw or circular saw. If you have the table saw, then you know you've got more advantage on making certain alterations to the cooler. Alright, let me tell you what wood I picked out. For this project, I'm using redwood. Redwood has a reputation for being very durable for outdoor applications. Right, so this cooler is going to last you for many decades to come. The redwood that I got are 1x6. I got 9 of those boards. I've got a 4x4. I got 2 of those 8-footers. The 1x6 are also 8-footers. And then I got 2 2x4s. They're only 6 feet long. Because I have the table saw, I will be making a rip on the 4x4s for the legs. If you don't have a table saw, then just go ahead and pick yourself out 2 more of the 1x6 and you can still make the legs out of this and it'll still be pretty strong and sturdy. As far as wood goes, that's about all I use. If you need to rib some of the 1x6 into smaller pieces, you definitely could with the circular saw. If you don't have one, see if you can borrow one from a friend. That's it for the wood. Let's go check out the hardware. For the hardware, I picked up 4 hinges because the 2 coolers are going to have independent doors, 2 doors to open them up. And then I picked up 2 handles. Now if you want to make 1 door, you only need a set of hinges and 1 handle. So totally up to you how you want it. I personally like to have 2 separate doors for each individual cooler. For decoration purposes, I purchased this skull bottle opener, which I thought was pretty cool. But they also have regular bottle openers. I've made sure everything was the same color so that it looks great after I'm done with it. Okay, let's talk about the plumbing now. The 2 coolers that I got, I'll show you in a bit, don't have drain plugs. And so I'm going to have to retrofit it and add drain plugs, which are these 2 right here. I will have to drill a hole, add these guys, apply some silicone, and then tighten everything up. I'll show you how to do that. I laid out all the components that I purchased for the plumbing that's going to go underneath here, and hopefully I did a good enough job so that you visualize what's going on here. So at this end, we're going to have the cooler draining, and then we're going to have a 90 to redirect the water. I purchased unions so that it can make it possible, so in case you want to remove the coolers from the chest, you can, right? So you just unthread these guys and then you'll be able to remove the cooler. I purchased one for the 1 cooler, and because we're gonna be joining the piping with this cooler, there's 2 additional here. Now in my setup, you're gonna see that I purchased these extra because my store didn't have any more of these type of unions. This one, just the PVC just goes straight in, and they ran out. They only had the 2, and so I had to pick up a threaded union. In order for me to use this, I had to purchase additional fittings, which is not cool, but you know, you have to do with what you have. I purchased these 2 male adapters so that I can put my PVC tubing on this side and then thread it into this side. So there's that too, and that's why I have that. And then this cooler is gonna have two unions because of this T, right? So you remove this union, you remove this union, and then you'll be able to remove this cooler. Once the water travels this way, I picked up another mel adapter so that I can thread it into the spigot that I have. So this spigot is a 1/2 inch threaded spigot, and this is also a 1/2 inch. All the PVC piping that I'm using is 1/2 inch. This pipe and that pipe is also 1/2 inch. So everything here is 1/2 inch, in case you're wondering. The tool that you'll be using the most in this project is going to be the miter saw. It's going to make it very easy to make these cuts. If you don't have one, circular saw can also get the job done. When using the circular saw, you're going to have to set up stops and have guides so that you have nice straight cuts. But if you have the miter saw, you can easily set up a stop so that all your cuts are exactly the same length every time you cut the wood. This tool is optional. If you have the table saw, it's going to help you have nice straight edges if you need to rip the material into smaller things. It all depends on the coolers that you get. It all depends on the height that you want and the width that you want. You're also going to need a sanding machine. This is going to help sand out all the rough areas and make your finish look really good. For joining the pieces of wood, you're going to need some exterior screws. The difference between these screws and regular screws is that these are made for exterior purposes. They're coated so that they last longer and they prevent from getting rust. And you're also going to need some wood glue. You can use Titebond or Gorilla Glue. I use Gorilla Glue simply because I've used the regular Gorilla Glue in the past and I know how strong that stuff is. For the coolers, I'm using this Igloo cooler. It's a 76 capacity can. I think it's 48 quarts. Yeah, it's 48. And like I mentioned before, it does not have a drain. So I'll be showing you how to do the drain for the plumbing on this unit. One last tool that I forgot to mention is that you're going to need a pull saw. This is simply to remove the handles from the side and the pivot for the lid. First, we're going to remove the lid. All you gotta do is just pop it off. There it is. Put this down. Now you're gonna get your pull saw. Mine has a guard. And all we're gonna simply do is cut this handle completely off to make it as flush as possible. Now you grab your lid and you're gonna have to remove these little pivots, because when you make this into your door, you just want it to open easily, and you don't want it to actually catch on to the hinges. Pat this backwards. Alright, so yeah, you want it open this way. At this point, you can use a blade as well. There it is. Let's give it a try with the blade. I haven't tried this one. a lot easier. Use a blade for these two. Do the same thing to the next cooler. After you're done cutting the handles, try to clean this up as much as possible with the blade. Simply because when you put the top part, you don't want any interference. Even the slightest bit that sticks out can throw you off. So go ahead, get your blade and just clean it as much as possible. Alright, so on this next step, go ahead and grab yourself a piece of paper, a pen, something to write these measurements. What you're going to do next is you're going to put your two coolers face down, right? Because my coolers, they've got like a small curve. Grab yourself some straight edges, scrap pieces of wood, whatever flat surfaces that you have will definitely work for this part. So what you're going to do is take your tape measure and you're going to measure on the inside of these two boards that I set up here, right? So in my case, I'm looking at, it's pretty impressive, 49 at the dot. And what I did also, just so you guys know, I put a gap between my two coolers. They're not next to each other, side by side. There's an actual gap in here. I didn't measure this, so to get the 49 inches that I got now, that was just a coincidence. If you want to do that measurement, by all means, go ahead. By my measurements, it's going to be 49 inches in length. To get the width, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to set up your straight pieces of wood. Okay, so this part is also important. Move your pieces of wood to the width side of the cooler. I moved that one away so that it doesn't interfere with my measurements on this one cooler. These are identical coolers, so they should be exact same width. Very important that your pieces of wood are touching the outermost part of the cooler. These coolers do have somewhat of a small bow, so you want to measure the outer edge. Otherwise, if you take the incorrect measurements, your cooler is not going to fit inside your build. Okay, so very important that you get that measurement correctly. And I am getting 14 inches. 14 inches on the dot. It's really impressive. Alright, and then like I said, go ahead and get yourself a piece of paper and writing material. I have invested in a small little booklet where now I write down all my measurements for my projects, so I keep track of it. That way if I need to build something again, I've got documentation on how I did it. Otherwise, trying to work with your memory, it's really tough. I recommend definitely writing everything down. Any kind of notes, anything that you think was important, lessons learned. I mean, I've learned a lot of lessons making a lot of this, some of this stuff, and I just write them down, and it's gonna help you out. So that's one of the tips that I recommend. Alright guys, so I look back at my notes on the first cooler that I built, and it's a good thing that I have this because I just noticed that I was really close with the same measurements that I got here. The ones that I wrote down is actually 49 and a half in length. So see, this is why it's always a good idea to have your notes. You can always look back and see what you did then. I've got all my measurements down. I mean, I even did my little drawings. So I've got what I need here. Something to consider now is the height. How tall do you want it? You can make it however tall you want. Just keep in mind that you're gonna have that rack. What I do is I'll go ahead and measure the length of the bottles, or the tallest bottles that will be under there, and then give myself about an inch or two of space so that I can easily put things in and out. So things to kind of consider when you're putting yours together. My rack, however, was pretty small. It was under 10 inches. I just measured a typical bottle, and it's about 10 inches. So I'm going to give myself at least a foot so that I have 2 inches of space in case I need to put something that's a little bit taller than the 10 inches. The way I'm going to do it is that I'm going to rip some of the boards down. So some of the 1x6, I'm going to remove about half an inch on each one. If you don't have a table saw, this can get done with a circular saw, where you would just clamp down your piece of wood onto a table or a workbench, and then use another board that's got a straight edge, right? Make sure it's a straight edge, and then you'll be able to just remove about half inch of the board. Because this is a wooden cooler and it's supposed to have that rustic look, you don't have to make sure that it's super straight or super perfect. If you couldn't tell, in my cooler there's gaps in between the boards, and I actually liked it because it made it look like it was some sort of treasure chest, or made it look old or aged, and I prefer it that way. But if you want it to be super straight, that the boards meet and join and you have a perfect seam, then you're gonna have to invest in some tools that are able to do that. But for this application, you don't need to. It looks great the way it is, and I'm gonna try to keep and maintain that look. I really like it. So instead of straightening out the edges, I'm gonna just rip them. So the first step is to cut your legs to the height of how tall your cooler is gonna be. I know I said that I was gonna do mine to 39 inches, but what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna cut it at 40 inches first, right? Cut all my legs at 40 inches, and then I'll take it down to 39 so that I can also cut the factory ends, just so that I can get straight cuts on all my boards. So for now, we're gonna do 40. Once I have all 4 legs, I'll bring it down to 39. I'm all about personal protection. There's a lot of sawdust here, and so I like to wear my mask and earplugs to protect my hearing. If you're going to be doing this, I highly suggest that you protect yourself. Use PPE as much as possible. You don't have to, but I recommend that you do. Okay, sawdust is very dangerous and can cause a lot of lung damage if you keep inhaling the sawdust. So I recommend getting some of these, recommending earplugs. I use gloves because sometimes the woods, they're not that fine, and I don't like getting splinters. I hate it. It's a nuance. The way I use my miter saw, I have here a homemade stop that I made for myself, so I know this marks right here 40 inches. I cut my boards to 40 inches, and so now I'm going to bring it back to 39 and cut the opposite end. And with this stop, this will ensure that all my cuts are exactly the same, and that's what you want. You want all your legs to measure out the same size so that you don't get any wobble. Okay, so let's measure 39 inches. As you can hear, I'm not the only one that's working on the project right now. Okay, so I've got my stop marked. I got my 39 inches. So now it's time to cut. Now, if you're curious about what I have here on my miter saw, I'll make a quick video on how I use it and what I have on it to help me make my cuts consistently and accurately. And then also, if you're wondering how I deal with the sawdust, I have something. It's not perfect, but it has helped tremendously. And I'll do another video on sawdust collection. If you're not using the 4x4, then simply cut your 1x6 to that length. You're gonna need 2 per leg. So for 2 per leg, that means that you have to cut 8 in total. Okay, looking at my super technical notes, we said that we were gonna remove half an inch of the 1x6. The nominal width is 5.5. Actually, the nominal is 6 inches, but the actual is 5.5. Right? So that means that we should measure 16.5 inches when we put all the boards together. If I'm removing half an inch on each board, then that means that all of them should be 5 inches, right? So now my total length is 15 inches. So for my 4x4, that means that the notch that I'm going to make has to be 15 inches in length, and I'm going to notch approximately 1.5 inches into the wood. I'm going to do this with the table saw. Now, if you're not doing this approach, you can go ahead and skip this. I'll still show you how to put the other 1x6 as your legs onto your frame. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut that notch on the 4x4s. We said that we were going to cut in 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, and we were going to go down 15 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our fence at 1.5 inches. Right, so I almost had it. And that's that, but let's double check. I always like to double check my measurements. Measure twice, cut once. And it is at 1.5 inches. Perfect. So now we lock that guy. Now the blade, I removed the blade guard that was on here for this cut because we need it off. The blade also needs to be 1.5 inches. And in order to get that done, I use a speed square, and just look for the tallest point of your blade. Okay, and then lower your blade until you reach that 1.5 inches. And if you have a speed square, this makes this very, very easy. And if you don't, you can use a tape measure to get it done. But I find it that with the speed square, you get it done pretty quick. And we're going to measure 15 inches down. When you feed this through, right, you need your first line. You'll feed it through up until you get close to your mark. So what I did on my last build, and I still have the line here, I marked where the blade ends, or where it starts to come out, to where this line's going to meet. And what that does is it helps me know when to stop, so that I don't keep cutting and the cut length is now longer. We're gonna have to clean that up, jigsaw, whichever one you have, to make that clean notch. But this is gonna help us do the majority of the cutting of the work. So yeah, I've got this line that I measured out, and all it is it's lined up to where my blade begins to stick out. And I have it again, so I know when to stop feeding this wood into my table saw. Alright, so we've got the fence set up to 1.5 inches. We've got the blade up to 1.5 inches. We're gonna get all 4 legs and we're gonna do just one pass up until the line that we've marked. And the reason for that is because once we make all of our cuts, the second cut, we're gonna move the fence 2 inches. Just remember that we need to move the fence 2 inches when we flip it over, so that when we flip it over, we get ourselves the 2-inch difference of the 3.5, right? So because we wanted a 1.5 by 1.5 cutout. So in order to achieve that, we need to move this guy 2 inches. Alright, good morning. I've got a feature guest today. I got my father-in-law joining me today. We're going to finish where we left off. Yesterday I had to go to an event, so I had to wrap things up a little bit earlier. So we're starting again today, this morning. In order to finish off these notches, what we're going to do is I'm going to use a jigsaw. The blade that I'm using is a little bit over 1.5 inches of cutting length that I needed, but that's fine. So it's probably 5/8. Because this notch is going to be in the back side of the cooler, you won't be able to see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first finish cutting where we started with the table saw up to where we marked our line on both sides, and then I'll come in with the jigsaw on this side and continue cutting it off, and we should be able to remove the notch piece by doing it like that. So let's get started. And that's it. We're going to clean this up with the chisel. You see here, there's like a little dip there. So we'll clean that up with the chisel. Clean this up with the chisel as well. And then it'll be nice and flat. Alright, so now we've got a nice clean wedge. We're going to notch these on all 4 legs, and then we'll start assembling them shortly after. Alright, so next what we're going to do is cut the side walls. On this part, we're actually going to be cutting to 51 inches and not 49.5. We're going to get 6 of those, and then after that we're going to do 6 of again, we're going to cut this to 14, not 14 3/8. I went back and I checked these out. So these boards right here, 3/4 each, so that's 1.5 inches. So what I'm going to do first is I measured out.
We're going to cut to 52 inches first and then bring it down to 51 as a correct length.
Remove half an inch on the factory cut side end. So that will make sure that we've got nice square ends on both sides. Next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my table saw and I'm going to rip half of an inch off of these. So I want these to be at 5 inches. The notch that we made on our legs was 15 inches. So if I have these at 5 inches each, then that gives you your 15 inches. So I'm going to set my fence to the 5 inch, and that way it's removing the material that I don't want on the left hand side. The next part that we are going to do is the assembly. We're going to start off with 2 of the legs, and the first piece we'll do one of the longer pieces. We'll screw it on the bottom, and then we'll be able to start assembling and building this whole thing. Let's get to it. Okay, so we're using some quick clamps just to clamp the piece together here. If you take a look, you can see where I cut with the table saw. It's nice and straight, and then once I started with the jigsaw, I don't have the perfect hands. So you'll see that there's this gap here. But as long as we are square right here, we'll be fine. I start with the bottom piece first because this is where you need the support. I try to have as much material as possible sit on this part of the notch, because this board is going to be carrying the weight of your coolers. So when your coolers is full with the ice and the drinks, and it's carrying 2 coolers, well, you want all the strength to be on this guy. So we're going to make sure that this is the strongest board of them all. We're going to pre-drill some holes, and we're going to use 2-inch exterior bolts. Another way to make sure that you're square is you get your speed square, line it up with your leg, and then line it up with the board, and you'll see here that we are pretty square. Only reason we're checking is because, again, this gap that we have from the jigsaw doesn't convince us. So now we're double checking and we're good. So we're ready to start drilling on this one. And now we're going to repeat the same steps for the other side. Now we're going to put the 2 sides together, and we're going to start putting the side pieces. Same thing, if you got some quick clamps, it makes this part very easy. Check your square with your speed square, and then we're going to start putting up all the rest. And now you should start seeing your cooler come to life. Alright, so to put these side ones, what we're going to do is we're going to angle the screws, we're going to angle the holes, simply because there's not a whole lot of material left for grabbing onto the legs. So we're going to angle it so when we put our screws in, it's going to grab enough material and it'll have enough support. And then also we want to make sure that the screw, you've got enough material to go through over here on this side. Otherwise, if you're too close to the edge, what will end up happening is you can split the wood. So we don't want to do that. So we just angle it. Alright, so now at this point, you've got the boxed bottom frame. What we did is we did a dry fit. We noticed that we actually had to redo these, and it came out to 14 inches. So we ended up doing the 14 inches. Probably what ended up happening, these coolers probably changed in dimensions when they were manufactured compared to the first ones that we did. So always do a dry fit and just check your measurements, make sure everything's going to fit in. Alright. The next step is to just simply start adding your boards. I would recommend to do just these sides first. You can do all three, and then you can do the ones on the smaller sides. Let's get to it. After you're done putting your whole box frame together, the next step that we're going to do is to put the very top pieces. To join these guys onto the box frame, we're going to insert some screws to the top. Now, if you can imagine that this is your box frame, this is going to go on top, right, facing the other way. You kind of want to get that in the middle. So if you have a speed square or a combination square, it'll make your life a lot easier, right? Because you just measure that distance. Once you have that distance, you can go ahead and mark all your locations so that you're always hitting the middle of your board. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to be using 1 1/4 inch to screw these down. I'm going to put 5 on each side, and then on this, I think what I'll do is I'll measure every 6 inches or so. Okay, so what we're doing here is we have added pocket holes on the two ends of the smaller piece to add structural strength to it. If we didn't have that, this was very wobbly. So just to make sure that we get it nice and clean, we use this 36-inch clamp, and then we use this other clamp to make sure everything's nice and leveled off, and then we were able to put the screws in there. Next, we're going to put the coolers inside, but we have to put the support. We're going to put the 2x4s. The way we accomplish this is that we put the cooler in using these quick clamps. We just made sure that it was flush. Just want to make sure that it's flush all around, flush on all your corners. And then we were able to put the 2x4s down there using the 36-inch clamps to hold them in place, and then we're going to bolt them down. Once it's clamped, what I'm doing is I get my 14-inch 2x4, and this cooler has these I guess wedges or levels right here. That's where I'm going to put my 2x4s. So I'm just going to put this guy right up against that, and then I'm going to use the clamp to hold it down. Once you have installed the 2x4s, it should be holding up your coolers. Here's the progress. Next is to build the covers for the coolers. The way I'm going to do it is I've placed these boards on top. Then I've got this piece here hanging on the side. This is going to be my front piece. This piece is going to be the longest and tallest piece, and it's going to cover everything else. So when you're looking at through the front, you only see one solid piece, as opposed to if I were to have a piece of wood right here and you see the edge. I don't want any of that. However you guys want to build this is totally up to you, but this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm just gonna mark a line here, and then I'll go ahead and cut it there. I'm gonna use that to cut the remainder pieces that are gonna go around my my cooler here. One thing to note is that I left a little gap here, so when I'm opening the doors, there's no friction. So to accomplish that, what I did is I just did a dry fit. I placed some parts where they're gonna be. Laid this one nice and flush, and then I made my measurements on both ends, and I recut these parts. Now that I got the side pieces cut and everything is laid out, everything looks like it's gonna fit well, I'm just gonna build sort of like a box frame. I'm gonna do some pocket holes on these side guys right here, and then I'm gonna make the box frame. And then from there, I'll measure what the distance is from here to where this one goes, and that'll let me know how long I need to cut the pieces that are gonna go inside the frame. When I'm working alone, I sometimes come up with like little jigs to help me hold my parts and ensure that things are being cut straight or being assembled straight. So in this case, I made a jig that holds this piece and my second piece at a 90-degree. I made a stop so that I know that it's gonna be nice and flush. And all I'm gonna do is just with the use of these handy dandy quick clamps, I can easily just clamp my part and start assembling. For this, before I do that, I'm gonna add some wood glue. All right. I don't want a whole lot, but just enough, and then just smear it. Okay. Go ahead and put it on there. I'm gonna clamp it down. We got our screw in here. Now we can let this one go and add the last screw in here. Now you don't want to drive it all the way in. This is a pretty soft wood, so you don't want to crack any of this stuff. So as soon as you start hearing the impact go off, I suggest that you just stop there. The glue with the screws is going to be enough hold for this. And we're just going to do this for all 4 parts. Alright, I'm done building the frames. And something that I learned or realized is that we definitely do need at least 1.5 inches, but I would recommend more of space here. I did want that gap and I couldn't really achieve it here because it's so tight between the 2 coolers. So what I'm going to do to remedy this is I'm just going to sand the faces of these 2 down until I get the gap that I wanted. Lessons learned. I would probably make this a tad bit longer so you can move your coolers further away and you're not gonna have this problem because there's just no wiggle room at all right now. You won't believe this, but after I cut these pieces here, I only cut 4 of them, and this is actually leftover material when I was cutting these guys. So whatever was left over is this, and check it out. It happens to be the right size. So we definitely got lucky on this one. And I don't have to measure anything other than I just simply cut it to the same length and I slipped it in, and check it out. It actually fits. And this is exactly what I was talking about, where I'm gonna have 2 large ones here on the side and then 1 in the middle. That'd be the smaller one, and that's the easy route because then you only have to worry about 1 guy. But if you want to make these all match, you definitely can. It's just going to require some math, right? You're going to have to measure this, divide it by 3 to get the length that you need to cut these guys. But I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm actually happy with the way it looks this way. And something to note, this board right here, it's got a bow, so you can see that it starts off straight and then it just bows out and then it comes back in. So I'm hoping that when I drill it from the other side, because I'm going to pocket hole these guys, and I'm hoping that it's going to pull it in. And once it pulls it in, I think we'll have that gap that I was looking for. I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet, but if worse comes to worse, I'm still going to have to sand this down so that there's not friction when they're being opened independently. So my next step is to pocket hole these boards, add glue, and then drill them onto this frame. So this is what the frame looks like, and this is the front side. All right, looking at from the front, this is what you're looking at. So it's got a cleaner look this way. But again, up to you guys, how you guys want to do yours. This is just the way I'm doing mine. Okay, so now that I've got the pocket holes done, the next step is just to put some glue and then screw it up. When I was building my frames, what I did was all the nice flat edges or the sides that were cut on the table saw, I put them all on one side purposely so that this part is actually going to be making contact with the actual cooler. So I did it this way on mine. You don't have to on yours, but I like it because on the top I left the raw form of it, so it gives it that overall rough shape. So just keep in mind that that's what you're gonna do with yours to keep track of that. And that's it. This should be pretty straightforward. They're screwed and glued, and I was afraid of this, but yeah, it didn't pull it all the way. I've got a screw here and a screw here, so you can see that this kind of got pulled here, but not so much in the middle. So I still have a lot of friction going on here. I'm going to sand this down to try to relieve some of that. Look at the big improvement. Just by sanding both sides, I managed to get a nice gap that I was looking for. Now, once I add the hinges, you can just imagine that these doors are going to open with no problem. I know it's probably hard to see from there, but just with that improvement, there's like no contact whatsoever with this other door. So this is great. I can't wait till I put it together. At this point, I think this is a great place to start working on the plumbing. We could attach the lids already to the covers, but there's no point. You can do that anytime you want. But before we put the rack that goes here, let's work on the plumbing because we've got that space available and it's free for us to maneuver. I remember when I was doing my first one, I actually moved forward with the rack and then I did the plumbing at the very end, and it was very difficult. I couldn't get under there. It was very awkward, and I just wish that I didn't do the rack. So looking back on my experiences, that's what I'm going to do. To get started on this, we're going to take the kit, we're going to open it. We're not going to use this part, so we can put this one away. We are going to use this with the gasket and the nut, and then what's going to be coming out is this part that we're going to use the male adapter for. All right, so we're going to make a hole. I think this is a 1/2 inch. Yeah, so it's 1/2 inch. We're going to make the hole. This is going to go through, and then we'll be able to put this with the PVC adapter, and then we'll work on the plumbing. So let's get started with this first, and then we'll walk through the rest. I'm going to drill my hole right in the center. You can technically put it wherever you want, but then it's going to get kind of tricky. So if I put everything in the center, everything's going to line up center. I won't have to worry about measuring and making these weird calculations. So let's do that. Alright, so the threaded part is actually a little bit bigger than the 1/2 inch, but that's okay. I was able to thread it on, and we can see that it's coming out right there. So we're gonna keep on pushing until we get some thread out, and then once we get the thread out, we're gonna add some silicone, the silicone gasket, and then the nut, and that'll do it for these coolers.
So at this point, I got the mill adapters. I cut the smallest piece that I could of PVC, and then I added the T and the 90. What I want to do is ensure that the 90 and the T align, so I've got the same height. From this 90 here, coming from the mill adapter, I've got the smallest piece that I was able to cut, and I know I had to cut it maybe about 1.5 inches or so, and then center it all so that it all matches the same height between the T and the 90. And then once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and measure the distance between the 90 and the T, and going, in a little deeper. So you can kind of see the markings on the PVC. And I'm going from that edge to about around here. And looking at my measurement, it's looking like it's 24 inches. So that's what I'm going to cut, just to make sure. All right, 24.
So let me show you what I did. Well, first let me show you my mistake. I eyeballed it, and remember, we put everything in the center, right, so that it make this job a lot easier. Well, I tried eyeballing it, and I don't know, I think my eyes are crooked. That's off pretty bad. So remember, this opening is 14 inches, so the half point is going to be 7 inches. And in order to get this distance here, I used a speed square. And what I did with the speed square is I captured the center of the pipe in relation to the top of the cooler. All right, so I don't know if you can see it, but that's a rough estimate. That's good enough. Having that, I just lined it up here, and then I just made a line, made my markings. So I did it here, and then I did the same thing here. And I also saw that this is about the same height, so it's pretty good. We're good. Just remember, this isn't the final piece. Don't glue anything just yet. We're gonna add the unions. So we're gonna make some cuts here. We're gonna make a cut here, and then we still gotta drill the hole over there. But this is where we're at so far. I have the piping set up. Everything's a dry fit right now, nothing's put in. Don't have the unions just yet. That's what I'm gonna work on next. I'm gonna remove 3/8, and that's the space that's inside. So I'm removing 3/8. I have marked on where I'm gonna make my cuts. Over on this end, what I did was I bored out 1 inch and 3/8 so that I can fit this adapter through, so that some threading can stick out, and so that I can put the spigot on there. And then I drilled a through hole 1/2 inch. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to add the unions, and we'll check that out in a bit. I added my unions, just as expected, 3/8 cut on all three, and now I have it all in there. Still a dry fit. I'm going to now use the plumbing cement to make this a permanent attachment. And again, these unions are so that you can remove your coolers if you need to wash them, or for whatever reason you need to remove it from the wooden cooler. All right, we're almost there, guys. We're almost there. And then we're just gonna screw that guy on there. Once we have the plumbing done, we're gonna work on the rack next. What I'm doing here is I'm gonna measure. I said I wanted at least 1 foot of room here, from here to the top of my rack. To put the rack, I'm putting the 2x4 first. So I'm gonna measure 1 foot and 3/4. I'm doing it 3/4 to compensate for the top. I'm going to be putting some of these boards and they're 3/4 thick, so compensate for that, and then you'll have your foot of distance there. But up to you guys how far down or up you want to do yours. Once you have done both supporting 2x4s, you can start adding your rack pieces. I cut mine at 15.5 and they came out pretty well. I spaced them out roughly an inch apart. I was running out on material, so I had to space them out pretty wide, but it came out pretty nice. I like it, very pleased. With the leftover pieces, we're gonna accessorize the cooler. I'm gonna make a bottle cap catcher with whatever I have left. I'm also gonna add a couple of 45 supports and a piece in the middle simply for aesthetic purposes.
To add the lids onto the tops, we're gonna drill 4 holes and we're gonna add the 4 screws in the corners.
To make the piece, I just put the 2 coolers in, and then I traced out a shape that was similar to whatever I would get, and just do a little dry fit. And it looks like it'll pop right in. There it is. Just like that. So the final touches that I did on this is I burnt it. I just grabbed the torch and just burnt the wood, and I rounded the edges off. So you can see here the round off at the top. They're also round off. I gave it somewhat of a design with my router. I just plunged it a little bit further down to give it that little lip right here, and then round these edges here. So looks really nice. It came out really nice. I added the hardware. There's a bottle opener. Here's my bottle opener catcher that I made with the leftover wood. You can get any leftover wood that you're gonna get and just add them on here.
And this is it, guys. This is the final product. This is what it looked like at the end. I know the video was a little long, and I appreciate you guys watching till the very end. If you like this, go ahead and hit the like and hit the subscribe. I'm going to be making a couple more videos on what I had promised earlier. Thanks again.